I'm Lin-Manuel Miranda, and you're listening to Hard NOC Life.
Well, it's the NOC in full color, you see me? The Hard NOC Life, comics, movies, and TV, yeah. Pop culture with
I feel like anytime you and I have conversations, it can't just be on friendly terms. It has to be recorded. So here we are, Hard NOC Life. I'm Keith Chow.
We're millennial that way at heart. Hey, that's Dominic.
The most millennial Gen Xers you'll ever see.
Totally. Well, we ride that thing because, we're nerds. That's the cool thing about being an older nerd. You kind of your heart is young for a long time.
Did you ever buy into that? What was the label? Xennial, like that intermediary generation between X and millennial?
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, I don't buy it.
Well,
I'm fully embraced Gen X.
you fully embrace Gen X. Well, I mean, so the thing that Gen X gets erased when they're talking about generations, right? So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
one reason, out of pride, I want to embrace it. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I think leave me the fuck out of it because
Yeah. Because that's what Gen Xers are like. Leave me
Yeah.
the fuck. Yeah.
Leave me alone. That pretty much sums it up. Because it's funny because now like the new thing is everyone's complaining about Gen Alpha, which is the youngest generation now. They're supplanting Gen Z. Gen Z are all like 20-year-olds now.
Right.
And because it's like we're all just chasing middle schoolers basically, right? Like that's the demographic.
Right.
that
Hopefully not
sets-
literally, but
Well, no, that's a whole other problem. But that's the demographic that sets like the trends, I guess, right? The teens and the tweens. That's what.
Yeah. I wonder what will imprint on Gen Alphas. I'm curious. I hope it's something good and not stupid.
Well, because I feel like Gen Alpha is the one that doesn't give a shit about comic book movies, right? Because like
Right.
the
Too many.
millennials and Gen Z, like they were completely encompassed by the MCU and the Dark Knight trilogy. All those things were very firmly in the firmament for those generations growing up. Because you and I, we had Star Wars and all those things, right? Like, but the Gen Alphas are the ones that are coming up now, going, I don't give a shit about. Like, they're watching TikTok and they don't spend 3 hours in a movie theater.
Right. And I get that. I have a TikTok now, and I like the forum. I'll say, I mean, I've liked my own thinking has adjusted to, well, making a 90-second movie is kind of as fun as making like a whole long movie, and cheaper and faster. And it's just like a little short movie. I like
As
that.
a filmmaker, though, have you completely just embraced the vertical framing?
Oh, well, that part sucks. But yes, I've also adjusted to that. Yes, in my old school Gen X thinking, I was like, yeah, this vertical frame, stupid. It does end up hurting your eyes. The whole generation is gonna be fucked. Let's not get it twisted. If you've seen Steve Martin's The Jerk, that vertical frame is gonna create a generation of billions of cross-eyed fucking people.
I mean,
that said, I've adjusted to it.
Well, like talking about, what was unique to our generation. I remember the very first time I bought a DVD that had the anamorphic widescreen presentation.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, oh shit, that's the first time I'd ever seen Ghostbusters in widescreen. Like my entire life, it would always, because I never saw it in the theater, I don't think, growing up. So I'd only seen the pan and scan TV of Ghostbusters.
As it was meant to be seen. I mean, it was meant to be seen in widescreen.
Right, as is most cinema.
Yeah, Ghostbusters is a really well-filmed movie. And yes, if you got the pan and scan version, you don't appreciate that. But it has lots of nice compositions of New York and all that shit.
Yeah, actually, what you were asking before we recorded, what did I watch this weekend? One thing I watched this weekend, there's a YouTube channel called Corridor Crew, and it's basically like VFX artists critiquing other movies' VFX, and they have like a whole series of videos doing that. And this past weekend was the Ghostbusters one, and they were talking about like how did they shoot the Terror Dogs and the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. It's really fascinating. If you're interested at all in visual effects, it's a cool channel to follow.
Yeah.
And yeah, like the way that they lit like the miniatures of New York to match up with like the lighting of the actual, on set to match all of that in the final composition. Because they're doing this without computers.
Right.
Before too. So It's real fascinating, and it's
That's
I think they're doing that because there is a Ghostbusters movie, believe it or not, coming out in a couple weeks.
yeah, yeah, I guess there is. I don't know too much about that one. But yeah,
Yeah.
that is rad. And I'll just to add on, like, was there any talk of like how much they were laughing in their workspaces when they had to animate or just create the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man? I mean, that was just like at the time it was a big deal because that was not a special effect that you see every day or in anything, right?
Yeah, no, one thing that I learned watching the video is that Slimer was a guy in a suit,
Okay.
and that they filmed in like a black screen, and like you black out his pants, but he's just in a guy in a suit doing this, and then they kind of overexpose or double expose, the plates to make him look, like a ghost
Okay.
and stuff like that. So I mean,
Cool.
it's not the thing I wanted to talk about on the podcast this weekend, because it was just the 20-minute video that I watched on YouTube. Though you did sit down in a movie theater and watch a 3-hour movie
Yep.
this weekend. So what was it, as the resident Frank Herbert stan on the Nerds of Color?
Yeah, well, yeah, I went to an actual movie theater and watched Dune Part 2, and I thought it was pretty great. And I have not paid attention at all to discourse buzz about it. I don't know if people are saying it's great or what. I thought it was pretty great. One thing I'll start by saying is like with all respect to the discourse that was around Dune Part 1 when it came out a couple years ago, was it?
Mhm.
And the special critical discourse, with our friends of like the Middle Geeks and that crew, there was a very valid question of like, do we need to do Dune this way again? This exact way, do we need to do it again? Because there's all these things like it's a white savior story. It is very Orientalist in certain kinds of ways. And if you're I'm talking to you again, is that you're not the like biggest on the novels or the Dune universe.
I mean, I'm aware of the general story, and I have been following the discourse online, so I can
Okay,
speak to
good.
that point.
Well, then you'll enlighten me on that point. But but I mean, very basic thing about Dune is it's a big metaphor for lots of aspects of Middle Eastern culture and Islam and a lot of religious and economic things which tend to play out in the Middle Eastern region. And a lot of the words are informed by Arabic and that's mythology. And so but it's not, but it's couched like it's, super Star Wars 10,000 years in the future too. So it has that distance. So anyway, the long way of saying all those issues were are justifiably brought up as do we need to see Ghost White Timothy Chalamet leading all the desert/Bedouin people to revolution, a la Lawrence of Arabia and all those movies? Do we need that? Is that weird? I thought it was weirder in the first one. In this one, they made a point of trying to address that, and not just address it, but like own up and talk about it.
So one example, and there will be spoilers throughout, and I haven't
Yes,
seen the
yes,
movie. As I
spoilers.
said, I'm not a big into Dune enough to like invest in the movies. I've tried watching the first one, I haven't gotten to it. So like, forgive me, Dune fans. But I will say, like, what I have been reading about this particular film, yes, there is I don't even call it a controversy, but like, the idea of anytime we talked about this last week, right? Like, coincidentally, about how, white people telling Orientalist stories about non-white people,
Hmm.
and that's one of the knocks against the novel and the original movie. But one thing that I did read about is that Villeneuve kind of like leans into it actually, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna shine a big giant lampshade on my white savior in this film.
Hmm.
And in fact, there's a scene where like they play up the Atreides character almost like it's almost like a horror movie in the score, and then the lighting and the camera work, when they kind of like focus in on his rise. And what I've seen people posting online saying like, people who are kind of misunderstanding the point are gonna like, when they get to the Dune Messiah movie, are really gonna
Mm.
lose their shit. And can you explain what that means when people say that?
Well, Paul is a messiah by prophecy, probably. there's a prophecy for that there's going to be Messiah, and he's it. And he's this little, not only a pale little white kid, but a kid who comes from aristocracy and richness and is like groomed his whole life to be a king, basically. So there's that. I know I didn't quite take all of what you just said. Like, is that discourse like leaning towards we should have more Dune Messiah, or we don't like that idea?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I feel like it's leaning more towards like the the point is kind of almost showing that his rise and his like essentially he's just going to become an oppressor.
Yeah.
Like the idea of like putting all of your, eggs in that basket and assuming he's going to be a savior, he ends up being a colonizer. I think, again, not knowing the background, that's my
Right.
interpretation.
Well, to its credit, Dune 2 doesn't like dance around it. It says that's Paul's whole hangup, and it's a good hangup. He basically says, I don't think I want to be the king of prophecy because I'm pretty sure that means I'll be responsible for killing millions of people. He just says that, like, that's what he has angst about it. And that's a good, dramatic problem for, so it's not like he's not doing that thing like, as a like I am, this is my destiny, follow me, brown people, and into your deaths. He is really worried about it. And probably the clever thing that maybe is what you're somewhat referring to is and well, the clever thing they did was they did leave it open for another movie. Not for sure, but they left it open for another movie in which the Holy War will get really real, even more than it already has. So they're kind of playing it both ways where they can say, well, if we can get away with this, we will make another Dune based on the further books. They pretty much wrap up Dune 1, pretty much. But they left it open where, well, we could get into further books, but just FYI, it's going to be a really big Holy War. So can we handle that, audiences, or not? Let's see. Does that make sense? They kind of left that open.
To your point about like what is the general reception of the film, I feel like critically it is what you were saying. Like people who were kind of iffy on the first one have totally bought in on the second one.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about it as a movie for a minute. It's a wonderful movie. If you like space opera spectacle at all, fucking just see Dune 2. There are some incredibly wonderful camera plus special effects moments. Again, spoilers, talk about spoilers. Just the one that instantly leaps to mind is, how, well, like in Endgame or in any big battle movie, there's a scene where the two armies clash, basically. They approach each other in battle lines and they clash, right? And we've seen millions of versions of this in Lord of the Rings, Endgame, whatever. The one they do is really good. It's low angle. It swoops in from behind Paul's forces as they're going in. And because it's low angle, it hits a little different than the other ones we've seen in Lord of the Rings, whatever. And it's just fucking awesome. And it ends up focused on Zendaya, who I'll mention at whenever point is appropriate, is also really good in this movie. But just, yeah. And it's got all this, and it's kind of like, it's also kind of one of those movies that like, they're like, well, fuck it, we'll just throw in tropes from all the big kind of genre movies that we like. To wit, there's a giant monster. There are little space fighters flying around. There's hand-to-hand combat. There's gun combat. If you like space operas, they try to check all those boxes. And this is part of why it's an awesome movie.
The real question is, did you also get a sandworm popcorn bucket slash, sex toy?
Yeah, okay. That's something you just have to tell me what it is because I maybe purposefully blanked that out. I know what you're talking about. I haven't seen the picture of what it would actually look like.
Oh, you haven't actually seen the bucket?
I've not seen the picture.
It's the
got
bucket
a normal
with the
popcorn.
sandworm. It's a because like now the AMC's and the Cinemarks, they like to entice people to spend a lot of money at the concession stand. They give you these limited edition, eat popcorn out of C-3PO's head kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the one for Dune, it went viral when they revealed it a couple months ago. It's a bucket, but it has the sandworm kind of emerging from said bucket, and then the sandworm is not phallic. It's almost it looks very anal. is
Oh,
because it
great.
looks like
Okay, good.
it looks like the
Well, that's
starfish
all right then.
with a big, with a, my biggest like, and everyone was making the sex jokes, jokes when it came out. But my question is, how the fuck do you eat the popcorn out? It just
How do
doesn't
you
seem
not like vomit at the
practical.
whole idea? I mean, speaking of Gen X things, you remember that scene from Lost Boys
Yeah.
with the mech? Yes, they're worms, Jason, they're worms, or whatever he says. Like, that's all I think the minute you start talking about a popcorn bucket with worms in it. And fuck that. I had
Yeah.
regular
Well, and I
popcorn,
think some people who bought the bucket did just that.
did exactly fuck that. Yeah. And good for them. Maybe that's a Gen Alpha thing that we have yet to understand. And God bless it, if you can make your bucket associated with the sci-fi opera movie also into a sex toy and not think of gross worms things, more power to you.
Yeah.
You have powers I don't have. But no, I went to a smaller movie theater. I didn't go to AMC, and they didn't have all those promotional things.
Do you think that we'll get the third one? Because I mean, it was the number one movie this weekend. It was like the only movie that made money this weekend. It's like the drop off from number one. I think it made like $80 million to like the number two movie, which made like
Hmm.
$6 million. So it's like the overall box office is still not doing so hot, but
Yeah.
Dune is a quote unquote success. I mean, it sounds like we're going to get another one if they
Yeah, I would
make the money back.
say chances are strong. I mean, there are a couple of factors like, again, this is about Dune fandom. It's sort of accepted in Dune fandom that Dune 1, the book, is the one, and you're really a nerd if you've read ones past Dune 1. You know what I mean? Like you can, like me, you can consider
But
if
this
you
movie's
read,
still part of the first book, right?
yes, yes, these first two basically enclose Dune, just the book Dune, the first one, by far the most famous one, by far. And you can consider yourself a Dune fan if you've just read that one book, okay? You don't need to be a completionist and have read Dune Messiah, Dune, blah, blah, blah. Dune 1 is enough to consider yourself a Dune fan, in my opinion. Of course, many nerds have read all the rest, but it's also thought of like the ones after that like aren't just as good, you know what I mean?
The first David Lynch movie, did that tell more than the first movie story here?
No,
Or
the
is
first David Lynch movie was also just Dune 1.
but what I mean is
Dune book.
that
Oh,
like Dune Part Two, does that incorporate elements from the David Lynch movie, or did the David Lynch movie stop where the first Dune movie stopped? You know what I'm
no.
saying?
The David Lynch movie is basically the same story as Dune's Part 1 and 2
Right. So
that
it
we just
actually
had.
told the whole thing
Told
and
basically the whole thing,
condensed.
yes.
This spreads out and is more faithful to the novel than the David Lynch.
Yes, it was a weird, yeah, and we can have rousing debate over the merits of that David Lynch movie. I like it too, and because I just like Dune stuff, and I say that without that. Anyway, it'll be interesting. So to make a third one, they will have to get into the source material will be the books after Dune, the first book, which relatively fewer people know about anyway. Lots of interesting stuff happens. There is a big holy war. Let's not make any bones about it. It's basically the white guy leading the brown rebels to destroy their aristocracy or fight them. And then I don't really know what happens because I haven't read them. But that's the setup. And so, if you can pull that off, good for you. It's hard to say. And also because it's like, things want to be a trilogy, so like I'm sure the bean counters in Hollywood are just like, well, it has to be a trilogy, so we have to make, another one, right?
Yeah, but I think what also plays into the decision of whether or not you make more movies is how much it costs to make the movies, and then how much
True
you need
that.
to make to like recoup those costs to even want to do another one. And reportedly, I think the budget for Dune Part Two was $200 million. So
Okay.
you I would assume, need to make double that to even think about making more. I don't know. I mean, and it's Warner Brothers, so who the fuck knows what like is what they
Oh
made.
God. You're about to say the doomsday scenario, the doomsday scenario,
The
which
Doomsday scenario when Zaslav gets a
right,
hold of it
they
and
make a
says that,
whole one and then like don't even
and you
release
get
it
the
or
tax
something.
credit is worth more than whatever profit you can make on the third movie.
Right. So two other things that really stayed with me in Dune. As I was saying, it covers all the great sci-fi big budget opera movie back, including there's really cool fight sequences involving knives as per the Dune universe. And I just wanted to shout out that the guy who was credited as the fight coordinator and is also plays a character in the movie is a guy named Roger Yuan, who worked on, I believe, Shanghai Noon and a lot of other things. And I was trying to confirm which scene in the movie he appears in face, because I think he gets killed at some point. Sorry, he's like one of the guys in the Atreides army, and I think he gets killed, and I'm not sure. And of course, because it's a Chinese guy, it's not like well documented on the internet yet because no one cares. But I believe he gets killed. Anyway, there are some really excellent knife fighting sequences, because again, with Dune, they have to invent a fighting style which doesn't quite exist in the real world because they have the force shields. So there's this whole kind of, Taoist thing of like, you can only strike slow to defeat your opponent. Fast strikes are repelled by the shield. And this is all interesting science fiction, weird stuff that doesn't happen in the real world, and they film it in a really quite great way. So it's exciting on that level too. And good job, Roger Yuan, for heading the fights on that. And I also just wanted to mention that Zendaya is really great. I still say Zendaya. I don't know if it's supposed to be said Zendaya, but
Zendaya, yeah, it's like Kim Basinger and Kim Basinger. Like you would think someone would figure out, is it one or the other, and go with it.
It is like Kim Basinger. Zendaya is great, and I have this little mini trope meme about close-ups of women actors in certain sci-fi action movies. Because if you remember, I made a big deal of Brie Larson's close-up at the end of Endgame. I think that's a shot that makes the whole movie. I compare it to one of the close-ups of Sigourney Weaver at the end of Aliens when she's in the elevator. There's just like an incredible moment that Sigourney Weaver does there as Ripley. There's another one I'm forgetting, but it's probably Jodie Foster. And whatever we're calling that trope, I don't know what it is, but close-ups of the woman hero in sci-fi movies. Zendaya has one of those. Several of them in this movie. Where
would it be Jodie Foster in Contact? Because there was they should have brought a poet. Is what is reminding me of when you said Jodie Foster.
I might have been thinking of Silence of the Lambs, but yeah, that's an
that's
extreme
not really a
example.
sci-fi movie, but there is a lot of close-ups and
You're right.
Sounds.
No, I think I meant broadly action. Any movie
No,
where the woman is an action hero.
But no, they should have brought a poet is a great scene in Contact too.
Yeah. So like that. But yeah, so in that pantheon, I will say Zendaya's some moments like that. And it's really important because, again, it's a huge movie with a lot going on. And as per a lot of blockbusters, one could easily lose this human sense of anything. One sometimes just doesn't know what character you're even following anymore. Occasionally, you got to have a close-up where you just ask the person to fucking act for a second. Like 30 seconds. Just fucking act so we know that we're dealing with humans here. Yeah. And it's a good cast. There are many such moments, but Zendaya has several such moments, and that really brings it all together.
And she's from what I've read, she's the breakout of this one. I mean, she's in the first one. I don't feel like she's in the first one as much. And in this one, she's clearly like the breakout star of the movie.
Well, yeah. And there's a little politics going on there, perhaps because that obviously sort of offsets the sort of white guys in charge of everything, that aspect of the movie, which is a problem. And again, back to if they're doing a sequel or not, I was saying long before Dune 2 came out, that's like, you guys should just fucking call Dune 2 Zendaya or Chani or whatever, because you're already putting her in every trailer as the sort of mysterious, beautiful woman in the dunes, and that's fine. But could we like elevate that and be like, she's really like one of the most important characters in the whole narrative?
Well, and the danger of these white savior films is that the exotic, beautiful woman is nothing more than just the love interest for the white savior hero.
Right. That's a very common trope, whether they're Asian or brown or whatever.
I mean, we touched on it a little bit. Like I watched the first 2 episodes of Shogun that came out on FX last week, and that's another situation where it's very much in that white male savior. I wouldn't call Blackthorne a white savior, but he's definitely like
right.
the what's the fish, the shoot, I used to use the term all the time talking about Iron Fist.
Right, related to that
Yeah,
Asian.
but anyway, but
Asian
it's clearly that, and they're trying
fishing
to,
in the water.
and you can tell with this new one where they have more Asian American producers in the behind the scenes, and strive for the authenticity of having Hiroyuki Sanada be one of the executive producers. They're trying to elevate the Japanese characters to be like the leads and not because if you remember the novel and the 80s miniseries, it's very much told through like the Richard Chamberlain character's point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this one is clearly more focusing on like the politics of the feudal Japan and
Okay.
not so much of Blackthorn arriving on the shores of Japan.
Okay, so you did watch some Shogun. I didn't even know that was out yet.
Yeah, it came out. The first two came out last week, and it's dropping weekly on FX.
Okay, great.
But it's in that same milieu, right? It's based on a novel. It's based on a novel about a white guy, stranger in a strange land kind of thing. And at least from what I've seen, and I'm not singing its praises yet, but I feel like they are making a more concerted effort of focusing on the Japanese characters and making them as important. And all of this is based on like real history.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, so they really got it in this day and age, one would hope. I have one more Dune point that's really nerdy. I just want to say it out loud. So I know you had a great segue coming, but
yeah, it's fine. Okay. I keep putting all my segues aside. It's all good.
You can re-edit it. The point is, there's one Dune point that is really for the nerds, the Marvel nerds, and so slight spoiler. If you care, just fast forward 30 seconds after I say it. If you're familiar with the Infinity Gauntlet narrative and how it was in the comics, where it was more emphasized that Drax the Destroyer had a really big revenge thing against Thanos. You remember that part?
Dave Bautista kills Josh Brolin in this movie. Is that what you're saying?
Well, actually, Thanos kills Drax in this movie. That's all I'm saying. And for us Marvel nerds, that was a fun moment.
Okay.
Anyway, Thanos kills Drax. But anyway, all right, that's done with that spoiler, and that's Dune. Great.
That's Dune. And well, the segue I was actually going for a couple paragraphs back was talking about the budget of Dune and it being a $200 million movie and being Warner Brothers. Who knows what budgets and profits mean anymore, because the most expensive movie can get shelved if you get a tax credit, apparently, in this.
Yeah, fucking A.
But it did get me thinking about like the ballooning budgets of some of these films that are coming out. And one thing that struck me is that, I don't know if you saw this, but reportedly the budget on Joker Folie à Deux, the sequel to the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie, is $200 million. The same as Dune Part 2. And
wow,
the amount of VFX and location shooting that is required for Dune Part 2, I don't see how that transfers.
Does he have a fucking plane? Does he have a Joker boat? What?
Because the first Joker
me?
movie that was Oscar nominated, won Joaquin an Oscar, won the $60 million. And I've always like been of a mind to say any Batman movie could be done less than $100 million.
Sure.
You could do a great Batman, and I wouldn't say it's great, but like that movie made $1 billion on a $60 million budget.
Yeah.
And
we're
now
talking
the
about
sequel,
Joker, what? Right?
Joker.
Yeah. Okay.
And the sequel is now costing $200 million. Is the addition of Lady Gaga and like musical sequences really worth like 3 times the budget?
Well, let's be optimistic, Keith. Maybe they do. Maybe we're getting the full musical version. And by the way, musicals are one of those things that are as expensive as exploding spaceship battles. So God damn it, if it costs $200 million, we better have 10 big musical numbers with dancing and shit. And like fountains.
I didn't think of it that way. Oh no, okay, now I feel a little bit better, because I was like,
I mean, yes, if it's just going to Joaquin Phoenix's hair, we don't give a shit. But yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, but that's actually a segue to the other thing I really wanted to talk about this week, and it's the speaking of gigantic budgets, it was reported, or and James Gunn kind of like debunked it, but I don't know how much it was debunked or not, but the new Superman movie's budget is looking to be north of $300 million. So like, I just feel like these ballooning superhero movie budgets are one of the reasons why it's harder and harder to get successful Superman or superhero movies, right? Because you think like Aquaman and Lost Kingdom was a very expensive movie to make. Yeah. And that tanked at the box office. The Flash was very expensive. That tanked. Yeah. Spending over $300 million on a movie that you are hoping to launch your franchise just seems concerning to me, is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, I mean, and also I want to not put, throw superhero movies under the bus specifically. They have this accounting overspending problem with all kinds of movies.
Yeah.
Hollywood does throughout history.
Well, but
It's not like
superhero movies have become
whatever.
like the modern action movie.
Yeah, fair
Like,
enough.
it's the
Fair
main
enough.
one, right?
They're all Waterworld, all the
Yeah,
superhero
right,
movies.
exactly.
And oh wait, I see you're wearing a kind of Superman
I am
shirt.
wearing
There,
a
House
Superman
Sale
shirt.
Yeah, talk to me about the Superman stuff because
I'm very excited about Superman.
Yeah.
So, like, budget aside, it started production this week. James Gunn, if you recall, a couple weeks ago after the table read, posted a selfie with the entire cast of Superman Legacy, and then just this weekend, he revealed a Superman shield that's very reminiscent of Kingdom Come,
Mm,
and actually that the title of the movie is no longer Superman Legacy, it's just going to be called Superman.
right.
But
Big
it's
wow,
officially,
but okay, cool.
yeah, it's officially under production. I was, going back to something you and I talked about recently, I was surprised they didn't just call it the Superman.
I I I'm also a little surprised too. Weirdly.
I mean, that's the trend. Just put the in front of something.
Yeah, or Super the Man. Anyway, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I mean that's great. I mean like I'm not like wow, that's a big news item that's called Superman, not Superman Legacy, but but that's fine.
Well, but when they announced it, I thought like Legacy is weird. Like Superman Legacy sounds like the last Superman movie.
Right, right.
And it was funny because like if you recall that original announcement of the DCU, they kept using imagery from the comics whenever there was of course no production photos at the time.
Right.
So they would use comics, and the assumption is the comics images that they were showing would be kind of influencing what the story would be. So for example, the Supergirl imagery was from the Tom King book Woman of Tomorrow. And then he announced, actually, the Supergirl movie is called Woman of Tomorrow. So everyone's assuming they're just adapting that classic Tom King book. But with Superman Legacy, all of the imagery was from All-Star Superman. And if you know anything about Grant Morrison's and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman, it is the last Superman story because it's about Superman dying.
Right, right.
So, I'm glad they're kind of moving away from the All-Star Superman stuff because it's a great book, but I don't need another Superman movie where like the end of the Superman movie, Superman dies.
Right. And Lois Lane has to dive into a pool to get the thing that they should have had 5 minutes ago and blah blah blah. That's stupid ass. Yeah. But yeah, no, I take your point. Yeah, did they they had a table read and he teased a little bit about the chest emblem costume thing. Anything else that
Well, they've started production. Like
yeah.
they've officially started production. The only other teasy thing is Rachel Brosnahan, who's playing Lois Lane, posted a TikTok to bring us back full circle.
Okay.
Where she's just facing the camera and she's playing the John Williams theme. And
nice.
And then Nicholas Hoult, who's playing Lex Luthor, and David Cornsweet, who's playing Clark, kind of like emerge behind her.
Yeah.
And it's just a cute little kind of like, 60-second TikTok. But the assumption is they're in costume because so you're kind of like because Nicholas Holt's head shaved and David Cornsweet is always wearing a hat everywhere he's going now, so it's we have no idea what he looks like as Superman still. So
right, okay. Are you excited about these things?
I am excited. I have to admit, I can't lie. Like you said, I'm wearing the Superman shirt today.
Yeah.
All my wallpaper on all of my devices are that new Superman crest, and yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for this stuff. As cynical as I try to be, you show me a S shield and I become 5 years old again.
Well, that's the whole thing about Superman, right? He's supposed to reach into that past that cynical shield and like, what's good about humanity. That's his struggle. As you brought up before, maybe that's part of the story. Just the old school superheroism,
Yeah.
Can it still break through? There was also to be nerdy on the other cinematic aspect. You mentioned the John Williams. Is there any hints on whether it's John Williams theme or Hans Zimmer theme or any like?
I would doubt it. Like I feel like and maybe this is just my bias. As much I love the John Williams theme, I actually like the fact that Hans Zimmer when Zack Snyder was doing his Superman films decided to go a completely different direction and make a unique Superman theme for his version of Superman. Same thing with the Dark Knight. Like Danny Elfman's Batman theme is iconic to cinema. And now we have a different Christian Bale Batman. You don't necessarily need to play the Danny Elfman theme, right? And then so the Hans Zimmer Dark Knight soundtrack became its own kind of
Hmm.
iconic thing. And then of course, like that threw me off honestly when the Joss Whedon version of Justice League was shown in theaters, because he did incorporate the Williams and the Elfman themes, and it just felt incongruous with the characters as presented on screen, because you hear the John Williams theme, you think the Christopher Reeve Superman, specifically to me.
Right,
Like
right, yes.
It's not just Superman's theme, it's that very specific
Yeah.
interpretation of Superman.
Yeah.
And if I hear Danny Elfman's theme, that's why the Danny Elfman theme worked in The Flash,
Yeah.
because it was Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
And then when it was Ben Affleck on screen, they weren't using the Michael Keaton theme, because it's not that version of Batman. Like those are very unique. I've always felt, and this may seem blasphemous to Bat fans, that it didn't make sense. And I'm going to say this, I know you're a big video game nerd. It didn't make sense to me to use Kevin Conroy as the Arkham Batman, because Kevin Conroy to me is a very specific Batman. And I know for a lot of people, he is the voice of Batman. When you read the comics, you hear, Kevin Conroy's voice and everything like that. But to me, Kevin Conroy is the DCAU Batman. That version from Batman the Animated Series through Justice League Unlimited through Batman Beyond. That is the Kevin Conroy Batman.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And it speaks to a certain thing like, yes, I like Kevin Conroy in that space. And I agree he didn't necessarily have to be the Arkham video game Batman. And again, I think there's some, not to open the whole can of worms, but there's that section of Batman fans who are these weird purist fascists. And in their world, they were like, well, Kevin Conroy is Batman, so he must be Batman in the video game because purity. And those guys are the guys I'm fighting with on Twitter about this whole Suicide Squad video game.
Right.
Anyway, so but my point is saying I kind of agree with you on that point.
But I like so that said, I like the fact that they use different themes for different versions of, even though they're the same characters, they're different interpretations of those characters.
Yeah,
and so
totally.
If you create a new Superman movie, I would want you to create your own Superman theme to be David Cornsweat's theme.
Yeah.
The way,
totally.
and that, again, to me, that's what failed about the Brandon Routh Superman. From top to bottom, that movie was trying to like capture the Christopher Reeve aesthetic and the Christopher Reeve like nostalgia, to the detriment of the actor playing Superman in that movie, because Brandon Routh was never allowed to be his own Superman.
Yeah.
He had to be Christopher Reeve, and that's setting someone up to fail.
Right.
Because you can't be Christopher Reeve, because you're not.
Yep. Although I do like Brandon Routh in his way, but yeah, he was trying to do a Phil shoes when he didn't make it his own. It's because if there is one thing we know about James Gunn, he does like his pop cultural referential soundtracks. So that just opens up a bunch of interesting possibilities, right? If James Gunn, if you're listening. And I mean, I like the idea of a Superman movie that is more peppered with like, hits of the 80s, 90s, or 60s, or whatever it is. And also, I like the idea of someone else doing the score. Maybe someone like, Pinar Toprak, or freaking get Reznor to do it because he did a good job on Watchmen. Something like that. Anyway.
And not Ludwig Göransson. As much as I love Ludwig Göransson, you're kind of like, you've done enough superhero themes.
Absolutely, yes. That would be that would be a little extra.
That's like when you got Hans Zimmer to do everything, or you got Danny Elfman to do everything, and like it's diminishing returns after a while. Like the Black Panther score, iconic. Like that is one of the better superhero scores of all time. But like, that said, I did like Ludwig Göransson's Oppenheimer score. So
it's good. It's good. And I like Giacchino's last Batman score.
Yeah, well, that's another great example. Like Pattinson's Batman has a very unique, specific theme to him, separate and apart from Affleck. I feel like Affleck's theme never really crystallized.
Did he even have one? Did he have one?
Like there is a Batman-centered like musical cue in Batman versus Superman,
right?
That kind of reappears in the Justice League movie, but
well, that slightly goes back to Zack Snyder is not good at certain things.
Yeah, well, but I will say, I actually push back on that a little bit. I don't know if it's so much Zack Snyder, but I think it's Hans Zimmer and Junkie XL giving Wonder Woman a very iconic motif.
Oh yeah, I like the Wonder Woman
giving that version of Superman a very iconic motif. Like when you hear like the strains of the Man of Steel score in the Snyder cut of Justice League, it's more effective than in the Joss Whedon version, because you don't hear like the strains of the Hans Zimmer score of Justice League.
Right. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Yeah, that is good part of the Justice League musical verse, and yeah, Batman is just the part of the Trinity that doesn't
He kind
land
of doesn't
as
have one, and you know,
yeah.
and that's where it's weird to me that like I used to argue this all the time 10 years ago that like if you really wanted to build up your DC extended universe with Man of Steel, you should have brought Christian Bale back
Mm,
because like Affleck was brought in as a quote unquote old Batman anyway. You
right,
already had a Batman that was established for at that point 10 years, you know,
right,
or I guess maybe 7, 8 years. Use him as the like the fed up Batman to face off with Superman, and then you can use all of that musical
right,
leitmotifs from The
right,
Dark
right,
Knight,
totally,
and Zimmer wouldn't have to create yet another score
right,
for
right.
Batman. But like, cause like to me, it's like imagine if when Batman and Superman finally confront each other, you hear the strains of like that Dark Knight like percussion.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
That hits different than
yeah.
like having to learn a whole new thing. But that's neither here. I
Uh,
gave up that
no,
argument.
I remember that thing, and I remember also thinking at the time, I bet Christian Bale was like in deep therapy during that exact stretch of years from being Batman and being John Connor and various, being in the spotlight for a while.
Yeah.
So I bet there was just a timing thing there and probably a money thing.
Yeah. And also Nolan very specifically saying my Batman lives in his own universe.
Right.
Same. I mean, it's weird to your point about like people get very peculiar about Batman and not letting
Yes.
Batman play with other toys because,
Yes.
you know, the Smallville producers could never have Batman on Smallville because the Batman side of DC was always like, no, he can't be over there. And then
Yeah.
Nolan being very precious with Batman. Now Matt Reeves is being very precious with Batman that
Yeah.
James Gunn can't use his version of Batman in his universe and
And
stuff
to be
like
fair, that's what Batman character is. He's an isolated rich dick. He doesn't have to play with
that.
everyone's rules. So anyway, I know
Yeah.
that's a little meta, but it's also true. Speaking of music, unless there was something else you
Yeah,
wanted to
no,
speak about.
that's a great segue.
Speaking of music and music associated with superheroes, so this is kind of my nerd popping thing. I had a good development in my pop music project, which we're calling 12 Valentines.
Yes.
Shall I just recant basically what happened like
I think this
yesterday?
is very awesome because this is where like social media and Twitter can be for good.
Yeah, for good. That's true. Yeah. Yes, all with the caveat Twitter is but it still does a
It's still
certain
a
thing.
cesspool, but sometimes it could be a
It
force
still
for
does
good.
a certain thing. So, anyway, maybe last week we're talking about in 12 Valentines, there's going to be this song called Scandal and Bane, which is related to Secret Six, the comic book, which is this particular run is by Gail Simone, the writer, and Nicola Scott, the artist. I want to say this is coming from a real place. This may sound like some sort of like fan star fucking story to get famous. This came from the real place that about a month ago I had COVID and was feeling lousy and was sitting on the pot all the time because your digestion, all this stuff doesn't appeal. And I was reading a Secret Six trade paperback, and there was this one scene that basically just like so comforted me or so hit me in the feelings that I was like, I want to like write a song about this. So we wrote the song, and we're in the process of making it right now. And we made a demo of just like the first minute of the song, roughly. And it's just like, well, we should run this by Gail Simone and Nicola Scott to know if they're like in principle like okay with this. We had the feeling like she's not going to say she hates it, but in good faith because she came up with the words that I'm using in my fair use fan project. I wanted to be like, is this okay? But I didn't know whether she would pay attention to it or what. So anyway, so we floated it on Twitter, and it turns out she seems to really like it.
Yeah, no, she was glowing in her praise. Tagged Nicola, and then Nicola quote tweeted your original
Yeah.
tweet.
Some of the words used were, Dom, I love this. Holy crap, I love this. Nicola said, oh, this is so beautiful and so flattering. I didn't expect them to say anything nice like that. What I was fishing for was okay, proceed. Just to be clear. That would have been great if I just got to an okay, proceed. But they actually, they said this is so beautiful and I like this a lot. And, that just meant the world, Gail Simone and Nicola Scott, I just have to say. And so we're excited to proceed, and we will make this song, and we feel extra motivated to make this other song about the Suicide Squad, which is also going to be awesome, but in a different way. But of course, the but is we're going to do this, but we'd really like to do it properly, which would involves a little crowd resourcing and crowdfunding. So, because I don't know what your concept of what indie musicians are like in this day and age. A lot of them are people who work real dumb jobs and just, they have to struggle to find time to make any music, as opposed to nap or things they need to recover from their stupid jobs. Things that make it all easier is if we can afford the right equipment or the right kind of travel or the right kind of room, so we aren't hassled with our low budgetness in the course of making music. So anyway, that's my way of saying 12valentines.net. Throw in a couple dollars to our crowdfunding effort if you can. You'll get the whole album when it comes out.
So the tweet that both Gail and Nicola responded to was a link to a YouTube video of a snippet of the song.
Yes. She did a pure retweet of the crowdfunding site, which is 12valentines.net or cool. Ko-Fi/Dama, and you'll be hearing more of that in the upcoming weeks because we're in the middle of it. We got to keep it going. And then she did a quote tweet, which adds her own personal perspective on the snippet video, which we were glad to find out was she liked it.
Yeah, basically that was very cool. When I saw that, I was very happy for you because
thank you.
I know you've been fishing for Gail Simone's approval, and I think that's not only did you get her approval, but you got her, endorsement.
Right, but again, the whole point is because we all know how social media and people's attention spans work. This is not done. Right. It's not done. It still cannot happen if we don't get some support or the project falls apart for some reason. So that's why I have to keep emphasizing that's not just like a thing that happened and it's done. Okay.
No, of course. No. Right. We want more people supporting. We want people seeing that link and seeing maybe listening to a snippet. Maybe we'll share some more snippets on this podcast. And
I'd like to I'll add, if you like to add, this is an alternate version. There's an alternate version of the demo, which is fine to listen to. It's basically the same idea, but it is exclusive to here on Hard NOC. It's a alternate version of the demo snippet of Scandal and Bane. And it is exclusive, and it's the kind of thing that, like, if there's like a deluxe version on Bandcamp that has like all the bonus materials and stuff, and I know you like your bonus materials, this is the kind of thing that will be on that.
What would be even cooler if you can get more funds is the physical media. That's what I really like.
Oh, you mean like a CD?
A CD, a vinyl, for God's sake.
Well, we love that idea. Yeah, related to my Street Fighter thing. We'd love to make vinyl. That obviously just requires money.
Yeah. So please donate to 12valentines.net.
Yeah, we'll make that vinyl for you. We don't presently have it in the budget.
So we'll listen to a snippet of the co-signed song from Gail Simone and Nicola Scott. It's called
Scandal and Bane.
I like to kick all my habits.
Wanna kick all my habits. What I want, I can't have it. So lately, I don't sleep through the night. What we do, it's a secret. It's a scandal, don't believe it. If it meant you just knock me out, and I would put up a fight.
I understand more than you'll ever know. Go where the lowlies will never go. To the others, we are Scandal and Bane. So don't you misunderstand me. I know what can and what can't be. Yet here we are. We are one and the same.
That was Scandal and Bane by 12 Valentines.
Thank you, Keith Casey Kasem.
Dedicated. Well, that's a bad Casey. Dedicated. That's bad too. I don't know. I can't. Now I have pressure. I can't actually do the
He's
radio.
one of the
voice.
greats. Like also the voice of Cliff Jumper, as we remember.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love how you always bring everything back to the nerd. He did a lot
Well,
of cartoon voices in the 70s and 80s.
yeah, I believe so. Cliff Jumper is
Yeah.
the one I remember. I think he did a lot of them.
Yeah, I feel like there was a Hanna-Barbera character. If you know which Hanna-Barbera character Casey Kasem did,
Yeah.
let us know in the comments.
Shout out.
Real quick, I know you're not a big wrestling guy, but I'm not currently. I used to be a big wrestling guy in the 80s,
Okay.
and then again in the 90s, and then fell off the last like 3 decades. I haven't really followed pro wrestling, but I have to say, I don't know what your background knowledge on pro wrestling is right now, but The Rock is back fully in his Rock persona.
What? Really?
He's not just
Oh.
Dwayne Johnson, he's like The Rock again.
Well, I know enough to that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and he's a heel, he's a full-on heel again, which is wild because like he spent so many years
Huh.
building up this like lovable, trying to please everyone persona. And it's almost like Black Adam's, failure just broke him and now he's like a full-on heel. But it's great. And I kind of was like aware of the storyline in the periphery about his return to the WWE and challenging his cousin Roman Reigns for the championship title. But then Cody Rhodes, who is the son of Dusty Rhodes, the American Dream, he's like back in the WWE and he was supposed to wrestle Roman Reigns for the title at WrestleMania next month. And so there's this whole like back and forth. And like really, like I really started following it during the Super Bowl because the Super Bowl was in Las Vegas, and then the WWE had this press conference at the same time that they were doing all this stuff on Radio Row at the Super Bowl. And like Seth Rollins was going around doing a bunch of interviews, and I don't follow him as a wrestler, but I follow him as a Chicago Bears fan, and he's always like doing interviews about talking about the Bears. And so like there was a whole thing where there was a big like slapping fight at the press conference between Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins.
Oh, okay.
The Rock. Anyway, I say all that to say over the weekend or the Friday was Friday Night SmackDown, but before that, The Rock cut a promo that he posted to Instagram. And this is why I think I'm a little bit fascinated with pro wrestling now is that they've kind of like are blurring like social media with the storylines on the shows, because he posted a 21-minute promo. He cut a 21-minute, a very classic vintage Rock promo too.
Okay.
And it was like I was glued to my phone for 20 minutes.
Right on.
Listening to The Rock go off on Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins. And I was like, am I a wrestling fan again? And I actually tuned into the first half of SmackDown to see The Rock and Roman Reigns in the ring, not wrestling. It was like what I loved about 90s wrestling is that they never actually wrestled. It was all just like talking on the mic.
Right.
And acting. It was a great acting masterclass because Roman Reigns, who's the current champion, by the way, was in the middle of the ring and not getting the crowd response. The Rock comes out, gets this huge pop, and you can see like Roman Reigns' face, even though they're allied in the current moment, be like, fuck this guy. He's like stealing my spotlight. And I feel like they're setting up, again, this is what to me is fascinating about wrestling is like, it's no one can, and people are like, wrestling's fake. Yes, so is a superhero movie, right? Like it's all about the performance. But so anyway, so long story short, like just the performance and the acting and the crowd work. It was like, wow, I felt like I was, to your point earlier about like the things that nostalgia taps into. I felt like I was a teenager again watching, Monday Night Raw. The Rock go at it with Stone Cold Steve Austin or whatever. But
now here's what I want to ask: if he is re-embracing the theatrical aspect, is that more or less likely he'll run for president? Does that
I
mean
don't
he's
know.
more just doing the wrestling thing again, or because I had him penciled in like he's going to run for president one of these days? But
Well, that was the premise
as
of
which
his
character
sitcom.
or party, I don't know. But
Well, that was the premise of his sitcom, if you recall. Like, remember the show on NBC, Young Rock?
no, I do not.
So there was your boy Randall Park was on the show.
Great.
It was based, the premise, like most of the show took place during Rock's teenage years. So they cast an actor to look like Dwayne Johnson as a teenager and told the story of like how The Rock grew up in like the wrestling business. But the framing story for each episode is The Rock on his presidential campaign. This is like 8 years from now.
I didn't know that.
The Rock on a presidential campaign being interviewed by Randall Park, who's playing a reporter, political reporter, interviewing, presidential candidate Dwayne Johnson. And then it would flash back to like a story he was telling about the time that Iron Sheik was babysitting him or whatever.
Nice.
And so like the framing story though is that The Rock is running for president. And then the other political, the question is, what are his politics? And it's hard to say because he's very much in the like, I don't really want to claim one party because like Michael Jordan, every Republicans buy sneakers too,
Yeah. And he has fans on both sides of the aisle for sure.
Elizabeth Warren is one of the biggest Rocky fans of all time. Like anytime she's on a podcast and they ask her like who do you want to hang out with, it's 100% Dwayne Johnson. So
really, okay.
I don't know if The Rock is into big structural change, but if anyone can do it, he can.
I have this feeling he could make some kind of change.
I don't know. He did claim he was the what is it, the power structure of the DC universe is going to change or whatever he used to say.
Right. Okay. So he might have taken a step back in that sense. Yeah. Just really quick. I know the Hulk Hogan era, and I don't know the 90s era as well.
Yeah.
Because I'm old. So just for reference, I know Hulk Hogan era more than I know Rock era.
Yeah,
if we're talking about the last century.
Right. No, I mean, I'm with you. Like again, children of our age, you could not escape pro wrestling when we were kids.
Yeah.
Like the WWF was as mainstream as you get. Like they had cartoons, they had cereal, they had Cyndi Lauper.
They had cartoons and Cyndi Lauper, right? And Iron Sheik,
Captain
obviously.
Lou Albano.
They had a few trope stereotypes in there.
Oh, for sure. I mean, it was the stereotypes were worse in the 80s.
Yeah, totally.
The 90s is when it started to like blur, and you got like it became more meta in the 90s.
Yeah.
That's when The Rock, and there was like the Monday Night Wars between WCW and WWF, but that's when The Rock came to prominence. And then it kept going for the last 20 years. I just stopped paying attention.
Right. It's still going. Yeah. And
well, another, and maybe you're familiar with this guy. He just retired. He just wrestled his last match last night. Sting is done finally with wrestling. Do you know Sting? Not the Gordon Sumner, but
the only Sting on my mind is the guy in The Police, not the Police, the band The Police. Okay,
no, Sting is the guy who dresses up like the Crow and wrestles in like Brandon Lee makeup.
Well, good for him, but I don't give a shit because Sting, to me, is the guy who was in David Lynch's Dune as a sexy guy. And anyway,
right, that's right. He full circle. Sting wasn't.
Yes, the guy who does that part in Dune 2 is not bad. But there'll never be Sting in that weird, death speedo.
Well, other than that, where can people find 12 Valentines and Dominic Ma on the internet?
Oh, there's Dama, DOMMAH on most of the socials. And on TikTok, I'm Dama1. And right now I'm asking people to go visit 12valentines.net or my YouTube channel, which is Melancholy Ball, one word.
You can find me on Twitter at @TheRealChow, _real_Chow, and find the Nerds of Color all social platforms at the Nerds of Color. Videos on youtube.com/Nerds of Color. Speaking of which, there was going to be an awesome conversation between Dominic and the executive producer of the new Street Fighter 6 soundtrack. Speaking of soundtrack.
Oh yeah, that's coming
like a 30-minute conversation. It's fascinating. If you love music, if you love video games, check that video out when it drops sometime this week. And so you can go to youtube.com/Nerds of Color, subscribe to our channel, and then visit hardknockmedia.com for the podcast and give us reviews and likes and comments or whatnot on all the platforms you listen to podcasts on. That's the show. Until next time.
Secret 6 Omnibus is going to come out this year, and if Gail Simone, if you want to ever be on this podcast for some reason and talk about the Secret 6 Omnibus, for people who like omnibuses, hey.
A great companion while you read the omnibus would be listening to some 12 Valentine songs.
That's the idea.
Yeah, well, let's make that happen.
Great.